Okay, people are joining. That's good.
Yes. So first of all, Akshay, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us, and it's an honor to have you here. And most importantly, I think the topic is something which is very crucial for a lot of parents of autistic children. We have been very, very confused about this, misguided about it, and in a lot of ways we are lost. So, firstly, I would like to introduce Akshay Shetty. Guys, this is our speaker. She is the founder of Sense Kaleidoscope, a unit of IIT Trust. And Sense Kaleidoscope is the first and only autism specific school in India who work on play-based teaching along with very specific autism specific lessons in curated environments. They use a lot of technology, interactive smart boards, everything to keep up with the needs of their children in mind. So though this is an introduction that you will be able to easily find anywhere on social media, I would also like to say a few things about Akshay which you might not know. So Akshay has worked a lot enormously in curating very specific academic curriculums which will suit to the needs of autistic children, not only autistic adults, but right from early education itself. So she has done a lot of R&D, and she's trying her best to put out as much as she can and provide to everyone in India so that they learn more. And the entire issue of cognitive regression, which is rampant, has an answer. So, of course, Akshay is a neurodivergent, which also helps further because she knows how difficult it is to, survive in this typically world, which is enabled with a lot of sensory disturbances and everything. How do we navigate through this in our day-to-day lives and still end up being productive is something she has already overcome, and she takes this as an advantage and brings this into her environment in her school so that her students are much more comfortable and progress better. So Akshay, thank you so much again to join, because I think as parents we can learn a lot from you, learn a lot in the sense what works most for young children on the autism spectrum, because when we say joining school, it usually starts at a younger age. So we're very overwhelmed with information. Then also we are quite, clouded with judgment. Above that, then there is this, there's a lot of misguided consolation that we receive. If a child is going to join in late to school, it's okay. We are often told that, and we are very confused about how to go about it. One such important decision is schooling. There are many that we end up getting misguided about, but let's start there. So we are familiar with early intervention. So
Yes.
the moment we receive a diagnosis, we hear the word early intervention. So if your child is 2 years old, they say early intervention. If your child is 5 years old, they still say early intervention. And unfortunately, often 6, 7, 8, it's still early intervention. So my first question to you, Akshay, is how important is early intervention for an autistic child, and how long can we give this?
Okay. So very simply put, early intervention, the word by itself, let's try and understand what that means. Now, early intervention is to, why do we do early intervention? It's to prevent the problems that are occurring or to tackle them head on before they get worse. Now, we do know that there is a child who has a sensory processing disorder. There is a child who's going to be confused if you are not going to teach them through a clear intervention. Okay. So, of course, there's a lot of research which tells you what to do. And if you look at early intervention techniques, just listing it out so that we understand what it is. One is speech therapy, language therapy. We have physical or occupational therapy, which helps the child understand how do I use my body in this environment? What is the relationship between me and the body? Okay, then we have psychological services. We have hearing or vision services to ensure that the perception is clear, the hearing is clear, auditory is working So in this list, I did not write anywhere education, did I? Nowhere is it written that education is happening in an intensive manner. No, we are trying to integrate their senses. Early intervention is magical because of that. All right. Now you have a window period to integrate the senses, Kirtana. That window period has got to stop. It is important because once you have that window over there and you say, I have achieved, I've ticked these boxes and my child's senses are integrated, my child is able to interact with this environment and the people in this environment in a fairly reasonable manner, he's ready for the next step. Okay. So technically your early intervention should start as early as 1.5, it can start. Okay. And it has to end maximum by 5.5. If it is not, then we need to go back and see what is not working over there. And we need to start focusing on that. Yeah.
So actually, I think this is what you've said is important, that by 5.5, early intervention should be over. Often not, this is not working in Indian systems. The therapy centers take as much time as they need. And parents are convinced that sometimes few kids, also again under the taglines of severe autism and severe sensory processing disorder, they are convinced that this can take sometimes longer for few kids. So what is it that parents can do? What are the things that they can approach to therapy centers? How do they work about it?
I think there was an interesting thing you mentioned, the diagnosis. I think when you go for the diagnosis, your doctor is actually telling you where the child is, right?
Yes.
You do know whether your child is positioned in the mild to moderate or the mild to severe, right? We do understand that. Now, I think that a lot of, we have to pay attention to the doctors. I have a lot of faith in the system of science, especially where diagnosis is concerned, all right? They are not going to unnecessarily misdiagnose. So if your child, I definitely agree, Kirtana, that where it is in the severe end of the spectrum, the necessity for the program and also the enablement or the rehabilitation will take more time. We need to understand this, okay? Now, I'm not talking about that section. I'm not also discarding and saying that section will require a lot of rehabilitation, require a lot of continuous interventions and through life. I'm not denying that. Here, I'm talking about the mild to the higher functioning, what we understand in India, is a mild autism, a moderate autism, which is what the diagnosis comes. Now, when you have that diagnosis with you as a parent, you're empowered. Why do we have to look at this in a negative sense? You're empowered, you have that diagnosis. You know that the checklist is there. You need to tick the boxes. The doctor has given you a go ahead and said, darling, this is possible. It's such a beautiful thing. It's a possibility, in your hands. So then you start working with that possibility and you say, okay, I'm going to check. There is a program in early intervention. I mean, from what I understand, Bangalore is excellent with early intervention services because it was the first thing that got put into the system. They understand the program. There is a clear, impact or goal as we understand. And there is a way to that goal. So as a parent, if your child is not achieving the goal, what is it that you will do? I mean, what is it that I would do? I'll go and try and sit down and try and understand, okay, why is my child not achieving that goal? There needs to be a clear answer there, correct? You put this child through 1 year or 2 years of intervention and the goal is whatever. You need to figure out what. Let's take the example of sitting tolerance, okay? Very common thing that everybody talks to me about. I keep telling, okay, that's a very old school method of seeing it. Sitting tolerance now today there are standing desks. In Europe, there are kids who are standing and working. I'm interested in seeing tolerance is not about how long I can sit on this chair for you. Tolerance has got to be about how long can I do this activity for you. And am I doing this activity in the middle of the activity? If I'm taking a break every 5 minutes, running and coming back, is there a problem? I don't think there is. Okay. That is the need of the body.
I think this is an important point, Akshay, because a lot of therapy centers, again, do not distinguish this in the sense, prioritize what is required. So the focus in the activity, like you said, is more critical than the child actually sitting on the chair, on the table and doing that tabletop activity. A lot of times there is a bridge between, but I think this is very important for parents to understand that are you aware of what are the critical goals for your child in an early intervention? Are you just going to the conventional method and they're just going ahead with their own list? So you have to be a part of that planning too, right?
Yes, of course. I mean, anywhere in the world, if you look at successful programs, okay, why in the world? I mean, there is in AFA in New Delhi, Mary runs a program where it's the parent is needed to be there. It's a program that happens in collaboration with the trainer, the parent, and the child all being integral parts of this program. The programs we run at SK require the primary caretaker to be collaborating with us. It's one of the boxes that need to be ticked for us to offer admissions in our space. And if we don't empower the parent, how are we going to empower the child? Won't happen, right? So of course you have to be part of the program. You need to understand what is going on. You also need to be doing the same thing at home, because let's understand, we are talking autism over here. The one method that we choose to teach the child to do that one particular activity becomes very important for all of us to follow. We need to cue in on that one single method, and we need to align. Then the child will pick it up faster. If I am going to teach in one way, you are going to teach in another way, somebody else is going to teach in another way, this is confusing for that child. It's not going to work.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think what parents should also understand with this is that if in case collaboration is so critical with your early intervention team, if in case this is not being provided by your center, it is your duty that you go in, question, demand this sort of front and back about the goals and the deadlines and your progress reports. Progress reports is again a complaint point for a lot of parents because many centers refuse to give them. But we have to go ahead with it. Akshay, moving on, do you think early intervention covers academics or education?
Early intervention cannot cover academics and education. We're talking language therapy. We're talking speech therapy over here. We're looking at basic sound creation. We are looking at basic putting together. And that's what we are preparing them to get into education. Early intervention is a toolkit that is going to prepare your child to move further into the next step. Whether it is education or further rehabilitation or further work, whatever it is, that needs to be figured out. That is the aim of that program. So let's not misunderstand that program.
So when we're talking about language, sensory, what happens to cognition? Isn't education necessary for cognition?
See, again, cognitive development is going to start with the integration of the senses. That is where they are doing the correct cognitive intervention. So if they put together the OT services, the sensory services, the speech services, and the psychological services, looking at the medical and the nutritional aspects for the child, once we start doing all of these things together, what happens essentially, you are integrating it all so that because also the checklist for the cognitive development is sitting in between 2 to 5. Let's understand we need to understand that cognitive milestones will change with your child's age. We need to look at the checklist. I would encourage all parents to download today. It is so easily available. Please go download a cognitive milestone checklist for a child who is 3 years old, 4 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old. Sit down yourself and do the checklist and understand where your child is. You'll know for yourself. So obviously, early intervention's job is not to move into education. It is to help the child integrate all of these faculties so that he or she is prepared to walk into an educational program. We need to separate primary education and early intervention. They are not the same.
This is very important. So you're saying early intervention will carry on, but it does not stop a child from accessing education.
Absolutely. I mean, if your child is getting overstimulated with a sensory processing disorder at the age of 9, are you telling me you're not going to go for sensory integration? That doesn't make sense. You will do the educational program and simultaneously you will support that child's need with the sensory integration that he requires. You have to.
Correct. So it has to go hand in hand.
Yes, it has to go hand in hand. And I think we do understand that whether it is OT or speech or SI, these things happen in a certain time frame. In a day, you have to give 45 minutes or 60 minutes at the max for it. So you go into an education program for 6 hours or 8 hours. And after that, if you are going to give 45 minutes for an SI program or 45 minutes for an OT program, you can very well do it. There's nothing stopping us from doing that, right?
Correct. So education is it important again to get into education at the right time? A lot of people, why I'm asking this question in particular is because a lot of centers out there convince you that your child is not ready to go to school. They're not ready to sit in the classroom. They're not ready to go to school. You can take another year, get them into school readiness. He'll be ready to school another year, and so on. So what is, in your opinion, in your honest opinion, what do you think is the right age for a child to enter into primary education, being autistic specifically?
Two questions here that I think you're sounding out. Number one, you're saying what is the right, is it what is the appropriate age to start education, primary education? That's the first question. And the second one, you are telling me there are early intervention experts who are saying the child is not ready for school, and how do we do this? Okay, let me take that question first, all right, because the second one is quite obvious. If the early intervention expert is saying that the child is not ready for the school environment, I want you guys to understand from that person's perspective, what environment is this person actually talking about? If you're expecting the child to go into a mainstream setup and settle down, no, guys, that's not an environment that I would put my hand up for at all, because I do not think we have the resources in our regular mainstream schools to support the needs of an autistic child. It's just that. I'm not saying that the child is not good enough. I don't want people to hear that. What I want people to hear is that school environment is not good enough. They just can't support that need. You know, if there are steps and I'm on a wheelchair, it does not support my need for mobility. Do you understand that? It just does not. Steps are not good for me if I'm on a wheelchair. I need a ramp. So I'm just trying to, break it down. So I think the early intervention experts might be coming from there, just to be fair, to also, understand from their perception and not to kind of misunderstand what they may be saying. It's useful to have that conversation for a little bit longer. I know a lot of people who work in the early intervention, professionals who work in that space, who tell me that, Akshay, there's huge pressure on us to get the children ready for the school system. There's a huge pressure. So we are asking somebody to deliver on a count which may not be possible, not because they don't know what they're doing, but because that particular environment is just not going to suit your child. So I think the two really important parties over here, parents and professionals, need to align. They really need to align on what it is that they want from each other. Are we trying to work with the early intervention program to integrate the faculties and get the child ready for a program that goes into an environment where it can be curated for him? Then fine, that's a fair ask. Okay, now question number two is, when should the primary education start? I'll turn around and I'll say, when should the primary education start for a neurotypical child? And why this discrimination? Why do we think that a neurotypical child has to go into early? I mean, there are parents I know who are pushing them at 3.5 when they're really young, if you ask me. It's time for play. So, there is a certain age that has been set. There is research to prove that primary education has to start at this age. Why would we not start that for our children? Because they are autistic, it does not make sense. What it means is that you need to create schools that can meet the needs of your children. Please redesign those school setups, redesign those environments, redesign the curriculum so that your children can learn and start.
Here I want to interrupt you here, Akshay. When you say you mentioned the word environment around 2 or 3 times. So this is going to be my next question to you, where I have heard few of your talks and you have mentioned this very openly, that an autistic child will not be able to sustain in a simple classroom setup of 30, 20, even 10 people. And you have told that out really in the open. So when we say that they are not able to sustain, and it is specifically because of the environment around them, they need a specific environment to be able to function and to be able to grasp onto education. Can you elaborate on this? What is it what type of environment actually suits the autistic mind? And to be clear for all our listeners over here, environment clearly means the immediate surroundings of the child. It's a sensorial experience that they're having, the people around them, and everything that is in the immediate surrounding of the child. So Akshay, can you just give us a brief, understanding into why a curated environment is so critical? What is it that their experience is so different?
Okay, thank you so much for defining, because whenever I say environment, very conveniently people forget about the human beings in that environment, as though an
Yes.
environment is devoid of human beings. It's not that way. So the definition beautifully put by you: environment is the space, of course, plus the human beings, plus the interactive setup, or whatever setup you have, a blackboard or a laptop or whatever it is that you have in that setup, the tables and the chat, all of this is an environment. Okay, what is going to be happening outside my classroom is also an environment. What's happening up to the gate of my school is also an environment. So when we talk about this, how is environment important? It's such a critical question in educational purposes for us. When I was working in Scotland, I learned about this. I realized that there they were curating environments. And when I came to India, I was like, okay, what's going wrong over here? Why am I seeing this severe cognitive regression plus mental health issues? It's not just one. Comorbid conditions are coming up for children at the age of 10, 11, 12. This is very young for children to start developing comorbid conditions. Not fair. So I then went back and I kept talking to the parents around me, and I just started thinking, what's the one thing that was different over there? The one thing that was different over there was a government or a public school over there would have a separate section. Would have a separate section. Sorry, am I back?
Yeah, almost.
Sorry,
yes, you're back now. You're back. You're back.
Yes, sorry.
Yes,
lost,
you are.
lost
That's okay. That's
sorry.
okay.
Yeah, so continuing, so sorry. Yeah. So continuing from what I was explaining, what's different over there was in a public school setup, they had a separate wing dedicated for children with autism. Classrooms with one teacher and one assist, and maximum of 5 children sitting in that classroom, sometimes 4, sometimes 3, depending on the needs of the children over there. Structured, no clutter anywhere, everything is labeled, everything is mapped, kept, so the child exactly knows it beautifully. The children are walking into this environment, picking up their trays, taking their boxes. They're so independent. Okay, and there is a dedicated teacher who works with them through the day, through the different subjects. They are not transiting teachers in this environment. For every subject, one new teacher is not coming in this environment. Why? Because they understand the importance of that child building a huge amount of trust with that teacher to learn. They understand the importance of this beautiful human connection for education. Yeah. So that is a separate setup that was happening over there. And the child was very respectfully asked, sweetheart, do you want to go into the art classroom for the mainstream setup, in the mainstream classroom today for art for 5 minutes, 10 minutes? You choose how much time you want to go for. And they would transit incrementally, they would not just pick up the children and dump them into the mainstream classroom and say, deal with it, Baba. There's such a lot of sound. There is so much, auditory stuff going on, the lights, and there is all this, people moving around you, pacing around you. All this is happening. It's okay. I'm sorry. You can have your meltdown, or you can do whatever you want. You will have to deal with it. Then they'll put one shadow. It does not make sense, guys. That means we have not understood autism. We have not really gone into the mind and body of that child and been respectful about the challenges that he or she has come with. Okay, so this particular setup, the different space over there, gave the children the opportunity to work in a space that was matched to their needs, designed to their needs. A lot of interactive work was happening in this space. They were inviting people like me who were artists to come in and do different concepts with them when the kids were ready. It was unbelievable to see how they were cognitively developing over there. I have worked with young adults where I have taken them, trained them, building portfolios, and they have moved on into university programs. I cannot even imagine doing something like that over here. So this is what I mean by, a special setup, a curated, designed environment. And of course it is going to work. It works in making them independent. How does the social skills, a very classic thing that everybody talks to me about, is they say, okay, I am sending my child to a mainstream school so that he can learn to socialize. It doesn't work like that. How can I socialize when I'm struggling with speech, or how can I socialize when the other child sitting in front of me doesn't stop talking only? It's continuously talking. Because that's how the other neurotypical children will be, right? I'm not saying one thing is right or wrong. Allow the child the time and space to be ready, make him ready to go and socialize. Here, when they are in this setup, the way we put the children together is where we say, okay, there is one child over here who is verbal and there's one child who's non-verbal. We cue them. They're smaller groups, as you can imagine, and we enable or we facilitate communication. I mean, that's a very, very important thing in India. There are a lot of non-verbal kids on the spectrum. We are aware of that. There's apraxia. There are reasons for it, good reasons for it. And communication programs are not being put in place. Alternative communications are not being used. Today, it is mandated abroad that if you are neurotypical, you know how to speak, you still go and pick up sign language. You want to be an inclusive human being, right? We're talking about inclusion. I mean, corporates are talking about redesigning their environments today to meet the needs of people with autism. There's such a lot of talk about, okay, we need to reduce the lights. We need to ensure that, sound is taken off, soundproofing rooms, giving them a place which is dim lighted. Corporates are doing it. Why are we not thinking of doing this in our educational environments? It does not make sense. Okay, so this is how environment will.
But here, Akshay, I would just pitch in. So if I'm saying from a parent's perspective, my child is able to sit in a mainstream school. वो सुबह को जाता है, he stays there till evening and he's coming back. I'm not seeing any issues. He's not crying. He's not saying no. So why not? Why not? Why can I not go to a mainstream school? Why should I actually, from the perspective of social stigma, if you say, the parent will say, मैं ये हक अपने बच्चे को क्यों ना दूं?
Okay, let's talk about that. What are we calling as a right? I think basic rights of children. Now, you know, there are a lot of adults who have spoken about how they have been traumatized because they were pushed into the mainstream system. Today, we know about that. Thankfully, today there are stories that are written. So I would first of all suggest all the parents to read those, because if you're talking about rights, can we please be clear that to understand whether this is a right thing to do or not, we ask the adults who we have put through those systems. That's number one. Okay. Number two, of course, the child is sitting over there. But why are you sending the child to the school? You're sending the child to the school for cognitive development. Is your child managing that? Because I have
very
a
important.
lot of 12, 13, 14-year-old boys coming to me, and we send them back for assessment, and I don't do the assessment because I'm not qualified to. An educational psychologist or services where they are doing assessment, qualified to do assessments, goes in, and we get a clear report where they turn around and they say, 14-year-old, 13-year-old child functioning at grade 1 level. Grade 1 level. So you put your child in the school for cognitive development, and that did not happen for how many ever years, and now you have pushed him back. You have regressed that child. How is this appealing to the basic right of the child? How is this decision?
This is so.
Some children on the spectrum, we have, like, just how every human being is, right? Some people are just very loud and outspoken, and some people are more reserved. They are internal, right? So that child might not be sitting and crying, but it's all repressing. He's still experiencing all of that overwhelm, right? The overwhelm is not going to go away. He's got a sensory processing disorder. You have a scientific paper telling you that. So I am being overwhelmed in that situation, but I'm repressing it. Now imagine the amount of mental trauma, and how does this constitute as the basic right of the child? I do not understand.
And I think this is topped up along with no access to communication, no access to express what they're experiencing. And please, parents, keep this in mind about what sort of impact this can have on your child's mental health. This is not something we can take lightly. Akshay, again, taking this forward, do you think anything will change if I shift this person from a mainstream school to an inclusive school? Because lately there have been a lot of, rampant increase in numbers of inclusive schools. So what do you think changes when I say that my child has gotten admission in inclusive school? So the school already knows the diagnosis of my child, and we are ready to support him with an additional staff, which is called, commonly called as a shadow teacher. Do you think anything changes when we do this?
Sorry, Kirtana, I lost you there for a minute. I heard the question only till inclusive school. I'm sorry. Can you rephrase?
Yeah,
so sorry.
No issues, no issues. So I'm saying, does anything in the scenario change when I pick up my child from a mainstream school and put them into an inclusive school, just because the school is now aware of the diagnosis of the child and provides you with an additional aid of a shadow teacher? Does anything change for the child from the perspective of the child? Does anything change? Is it becoming more better for him or her?
I would go back and look at the numbers of the students and the numbers of the students in the classroom. I would go back and see how much of that that inclusive school has curated or structured their classroom to meet the needs of my child. I would then go back and I would also check shadow teacher is not good enough, because we are looking at involvement in education. Education, cognitive development is not going to happen without engagement and complete involvement. Is that being facilitated in this so-called inclusive classroom? I would try to look at these parameters. If it is, the answer is yes. If it is not, then the answer is no. That is as simple as it is. Plus, an inclusive school, do they have a communication expert going in there? Are they able to provide for activities for sensory integration if the child needs it? I mean, these are very simple things, Kirtana. What I'm trying to say is, see, again, I'm trying to empower the parents here. I'm not saying that you have to listen to me. No, I am saying, why can't you work it out yourself? You know your child better than anybody else. Why is it that you cannot look, study, research, read, go be in that space and then just identify whether this is working for your child or not? At the end of the day, it is that simple, to be honest.
Yes, I can completely agree to this. Recently one of the parents approached me and she was saying that initially when her daughter was in LKG, UKG, first grade, she was doing completely fine academically, doing really well. By the time she she went to second grade, she started losing concentration and would just refuse to sit in class. She would start roaming around and everything. And, that's why we realized that though it was a inclusive setup, she has a shadow teacher, she has the support required, they spend some time with her, end of the day. But during the class, is she getting that sort of movement that she needs through the structure? She is not. I think that is where she is finding it difficult to regulate. And of course, I think this sort of difficulty will interrupt further into her grasping what's going on in class. So slowly they transition, they transit from this to getting into, only assistance. And they actually meaningfully, like you said, meaningfully, they don't learn anything from that classroom.
So then you're not achieving the objective. So what's the point?
I can understand. So there's one more thing that I wanted to specifically talk to you. You have a lot of different age range of students that come into your school. So yes. Can you throw some light on what are the impacts that you see when a child goes into the typical mode of education, that is going into mainstream, first starting with early intervention, going into mainstream and coming out? What do you think has been the impact of taking this step?
Number one, I think the child, the other thing is that we don't tell our children over here that you have autism. There's a huge debate. There's like clusters over here who say, I'm going to tell my child whether he's autistic or not. I've faced it many times where I've told the parent that, no, it's time that we need to tell the child that he's different and it's okay to be different. I mean, there are multiple ways we actually do it in our setup. Most of my kids are proud that they have autism. I don't think they use it as a bad word. And I very constantly work with them stating that, no, there's nothing wrong about it. Akshay is short. There's nothing wrong in being short. Somebody's wearing glasses. There's nothing wrong in wearing glasses, So what What I'm trying
Please,
to
parents,
say
pay attention. Please, parents, pay attention to these important words being said here. Autism is a good thing. Please do not think this is something bad about your child. Please, please, you are the first ones to empower your child with this confidence, and no one else can make them believe the better of it.
So when you said what is the impact on autism, very simply, as opposed to singling out one child or the other, one thing about children we need to understand, forget autism, is that all children want to be loved and accepted for who they are, how they are. Okay? No judgments, please. This child goes into a regular setup where the other children are also confused about why this child is different, or why is he behaving unlike us. So they also don't know how to interact with this child. It creates a huge gap. The child with autism is left thinking, what's going on? I'm not having any friends. Everybody else is playing. Everything is working for everybody else, but it's not working for me. Now that creates a huge void within that individual. Why can't we understand that? I mean, how would you feel if I picked you up and put you in a different cultural context where you can't associate with anything, but I tell you, no, you have to manage, and without giving you any necessary support to actually get into that space? That's what we're doing with the children. The children feel neglected. They feel misread, misunderstood. I have teenagers who have come and told me how they have been bullied in schools, then how they became bullies, because that was the only way to survive. It's true. Either when I'm getting bullied, I'm going to become like the repressive thing I spoke about. That's one possibility. And I'm going to start having a lot of psychological trauma that will keep adding up inside me. And all of that has consequences, right? Then the other extreme is, no, I'll bully you. I'll take that aggressive path. And then that individual will be told that he is aggressive. So what choices are we leaving our children with? And there are so many such stories. I mean, what I would do is invite all of you to come to my school, sit down with my teenagers, listen to them. Or, Kirtana, maybe we should bring one of our students into these lives and get him to talk. Because that, I think, will be more tangible for parents than me actually stating these things. And my teenagers are empowered to speak their life stories. I work on that with them. There are multiple other layers to this, Kirtana. It is not just this. The fact that you are not accepted as a human being the way you are puts a lot of barriers. And once they grow and things become more complicated, I can't tell you. It becomes more complicated. Very simple example I'll give you of this teenager who's, having crushes on the teachers in the school. And I told him, this inappropriate, darling, what are you doing? He's like, no, I'll never get anybody outside. So I might as well make do with what I have. So it's classic autism answer, very literal, and trying to find the solution that I can find, at the present moment. But what made me really sad is he has somewhere also accepted the idea that he is never going to be accepted for who he is in that neurotypical circle.
That's heartbreaking. That's
heartbreaking. And where does he get this idea? Because he was in that setup. It's his personal life experience. And that for me is really, really scary. I don't think it's worth it, guys. I really don't think it's worth it. So mental health, I mean, that's a totally different conversation, Kirtana. We can have another.
Which we will be having a series of lives on mental health, because I keep telling mental health is not something that we can take for granted. We are all only talking about, education, mainstream occupations and everything, but we are not talking about the critical things like mental health of the autistic child. We will be doing a series on that. But please, parents, please understand. One second over there. One second.
She's okay.
I think she has got the clue that she's not being allowed into this room. So that's taking a toll on her. But anyways, sorry, I lost track of
I think you should just allow her. It's fine. I think you should just allow her to come. It's okay. She can come and say hi to all of us.
Yes, I will let her in.
Acceptance.
That is true. So, when we are saying that the mainstream school is can be this, deterring to the development of our child. Inclusive is not doing any better. The next option that we have are special schools. So from parent perspectives, I think that at least in India, there's a lot of stigma that runs around special school. It somehow says that if your child is going to a special school, he's not capable and he's not doing well enough, and his life is anyways going into management mode, not in an achievement sort of mode and things like that. That's a bigger topic to cover, why the social stigma is there, and it has to go. But I still want to understand from you, can you from your perspective try and explain us what is different when we are saying that we should be putting our children into autism specific environments and lesson plans? What is it that you're talking? Why is it that our children need this different setup for them to understand, or just go further?
So I think that's where we are working at SK or in SK. I decided that this cognitive regression problem was something that's going to become my core area of focus, because working with teenagers and young adults, which is something that I did quite a lot when we were setting up the art college, it became really tangibly real for me as to how this problem was going into so many different layers and affecting not just the life of that particular individual on the spectrum, but completely tearing apart the life of the entire family as well. Okay. And I think when you work very closely with adults, or when you work very closely with teenagers, and you on a day-on-day basis, when you go through what you're going through, you will understand how difficult it can be. So keeping this as our core goal, cognitive regression and how to stop it, I've moved into designing an autism specific curriculum, which we have been testing for the past 2-3 years. Now we are going into a pure R&D phase where we are putting together a team of 25 students for preschool and grade 1. Okay. And we are going to start this R&D because obviously we want to validate the impacts, the objectives and the goals that we are going to achieve through this program, which then we obviously want to take up to the policy level and say, please help us change this, okay, and create more and more schools that can actually do this. So that's I think where we are at in Sense Kaleidoscopes. We are setting up the academic department. We are taking the admissions. We are looking at this 25 kids that we want to put through this research program. And also it's important to have those 25 mothers involved in those programs, because it's a collaborative process to see how we can definitively do the checklist on a year-on-year, and we can achieve these goals and stop where we are. I think you're muted.
So I think this is possible.
Yes,
this is possible.
We have been working. Yes, this is possible. It is definitely possible. We use, so a couple of things that we do in the classroom. Obviously, we are an out and out autism setup. We do not have any mixed children coming in over there. And we are also working with a lot of technology. A lot of my background work in Scotland has taught me that tech is a huge advantage today for education. You know, putting children in front of screens is another conversation that we can have. I mean, sometimes people misunderstand that playing a game is not the same as educating yourself with technology. There are two different aspects to it. And for children with autism who have problem with abstract thinking, it is so important to put visuals, to put auditory, to stimulate their senses so that they grasp the concepts properly. Hence, tech becomes a very strong ally for us in this journey. The other thing is that the curriculum by itself is built by me. I'm a neurodivergent. I build it in sync with my students. So we do a lot of drawing board exercises where we actually take it in the classroom, see if it works or not. Then we come back out. That's what we've been spending a lot of time in the past 2 years. My students have been hands-in involved in developing this curriculum. And the students who have had severe problems, again, we are looking at severe cognitive processing problems. Those are the students I bring into the inner circle to design this curriculum, because bear in mind, Kirtana, when you are designing a solution, design it for the most difficult student, not for the easiest one. It does not work that way. Okay, so that's where we come. We have detailed lesson plans because I want my teachers to be in the classroom, playing, interacting, doing theatrics to bring the children to enjoy the content. I don't want my teacher to be thinking about what should I teach today. And I don't want my teacher to be tired going back home and, sitting and prepping for the next day's classroom. That does not help me. I need her to have the energy. I need her to, come into the classroom with this vigor, with this excitement that today I'm going to be spending time with my kids and that's what I'm going to be focused on. I want her to pay attention to the moods of my children, to see what is going right and wrong, to help them emotionally, to help them socially interact with each other. These are important things. The what is going to be designed in the curriculum. It is going to be embedded in the curriculum. So you see how many things we are actually trying to put together. Yeah. So that's where
I fail to understand how this would be possible in a mainstream school. I think that's the biggest gap we have in the system, that this might not be possible. But I'm very excited about how this is going to turn out in Sense Kaleidoscope, and we would love to see the progress and everything, Akshay. I think it'll be wonderful to see that magic happening right in front of our eyes, and it'll be, like you said, right? It'll be proof that this works, and our children do need this specific assistance, specific assistance which has been made based on their abilities, their thinking, their way of life. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Akshay. I think we covered a lot of things, and I hope parents get a clearer picture about why mainstream schools can do more harm than benefit. Please, please, please emphasize on your child's condition and their comfort over all other social stigmas or suggestions about walking the normal path. And like Dr. Sue says, why fit in when you're born to stand out? Thank you so much again.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much again, Akshay.
Absolutely.
I love talking to you.
Thank you.
And okay, Shalo, we'll be seeing soon on the series that we have planned, and hopefully it'll be equally exciting. And thank you again. See you.
Thank you, Kirtana. Thank you very much. This was really good. Thank you.
Bye.